Welcome back. On to the other big conversation tonight. Your voter ID might soon be linked to your Aadhaar card. Now, as per a Times of India report, the government has decided to amend the Aadhaar Act to empower the Election Commission so that they can link your Aadhaar and voter ID. Now, this is being done in an attempt to remove the bogus and the duplicate entries which are there from voter lists by matching them with the Aadhaar names and numbers. The Law Ministry is working on a note to be put up before the Cabinet for this decision. After that, we also did a few checks of our own. And here is what the Election Commission has told Mirror Now. This is very interesting, viewers. Ayushman of Mirror Now has actually learned from the Election Commission that they are actively discussing implementation of Aadhaar and voter ID linkage, that they are prepared to change the Representation of People's Act. Legally, they will have to do that. They're also prepared to change the Aadhaar law. The Election Commission is also exploring technology so that you can have people voting from a location outside their registered constituency. For migrants, if you are registered in one part of the country, but for work you are in another part of the country, the Election Commission is looking at options of how you can vote from there. Remote voting essentially is being considered, and it will have to be done in a supervised manner. The Election Commission also says that they are exploring and they are looking at private networks to be used as a mode for enabling you to vote from anywhere. Essentially, it's like online voting on a private network that the Election Commission will set up. Now, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? How will it work? What should we be wary of? If this happens, it will be great for many people because there are hundreds and lakhs of lost votes in our country because we are not there when the election takes place and we are working in some other part of the country. But if this happens, what are the challenges for the Election Commission? That's the big question that we are trying to find the answers to. I also want to just give you the pros and cons of how this really works. Those who are in favor of the linkage and online voting say that this will help remove the bogus voters. But the others say, well, Aadhaar is not foolproof. There have been instances of fake Aadhaar cards, an instance of duplicate cards and multiple Aadhaar cards. So how does that help? On one side, people say remote voting will help the migrants. But the others say that the minute you make it online and not a simple individual EVM machine, but say that it's on some kind of a network, that opens it up to the dangers of hacking. But those who are in favor of the Aadhaar voter ID linkage say that if you help and bring in remote voting, it will also help NRIs who are not in the country but can participate in elections. The others say that no country allows this, obviously, because there are some issues with the technology and whether you can really verify who's voting on the other end, if that's a genuine voter. And then poll panel says that privacy will be maintained, but those who are questioning this are saying linkage may compromise privacy. That being said, let's ask our experts, what's the way to go forward? Obviously, as a concept, to enable people to vote from not just their own constituency, their own area, but anywhere else is a great concept, and it will help bring in so many more people to vote during elections. But how do we ensure that this doesn't get abused or misused? Let's say good evening to Major General Anil Verma, head of ADR, Vinit Goenka, leader of the BJP, Mr. S.K. Mendiratha, former legal advisor to the Election Commission, Shailesh Gandhi, former Chief Information Commissioner, and Pavan Duggal, a cyber law expert. Let me begin with Vinit Goenka and ask his views. Mr. Goenka, are some of these concerns valid? Are there any solutions that can be looked at?
Yeah, of course. Any concern in democracy and about technology has to be addressed. And if that is concerning with the technological input in the democracy, then further it should be answered. But having said so, I think linking Aadhaar with voter ID will be very good for three reasons. A, the voter card itself has eliminated many bogus voters. So this will further strengthen the process. If there are bogus voters, that will be removed. A. B, where we all people were demanding, those people who do not stay in the constituency and they travel. There are people who cannot afford to go back to their constituency for only the sake of voting. Those people can be also, part of the franchise, and they can also exercise their franchisee. They can vote. There are certain people like refugees of Kashmir who are in Delhi who could not vote and participate there in Kashmir. Those people also can vote. So this is the advantage of this. Yes, you rightly pointed out. Will it create any kind of technological snag or this thing? This can be discussed. As far as my knowledge goes or understanding goes, Aadhaar is very much safe. There is no information about leakage or there is nothing to be worried about it.
Okay, let me actually ask Pavan Duggal this question, because often, Pavan Duggal, even in today's day and age, there are constantly questions that are raised about EVMs and whether EVMs can be hacked or not. And here we are looking at a step further kind of a technology, which will be a blockchain or a private network. Won't that further complicate and the situation and raise more questions?
Well, the idea of joining Aadhaar with the election ID or the election rolls may look a very attractive idea on the paper. But the moment you start implementing it, you are going to open up a Pandora's box of legal challenges, of technological approaches that you will have to deal with. First and foremost, the biggest nightmare that's going to get started with this linking is that Indian cybersecurity shall stand exposed. It'll be so easy for cyber criminals and cybersecurity breaches across the world to go ahead and just pierce through the so-called security wall of Aadhaar, and then they will have a direct access to have a direct handle to interfere in Indian elections. Already, history has been replete in the last 2 years of how hackers across the world have tried to influence the outcome of elections. And what best way to go ahead and impact the biggest democracy in the world than to go ahead and breach into the cybersecurity breaches and the vulnerabilities, and thereby go ahead and impact elections. So I believe it's going to be a cybersecurity nightmare from a technological standpoint. This is all the more so because Aadhaar is not completely safe. The Aadhaar central identities data repository may be safe, but the ecosystem that's come around Aadhaar post the demonetization is completely unsafe. And that's further manifested by the fact that the UIDAI has launched more than 50 FIRs last year because of various breaches of Aadhaar. Now, if breaches of Aadhaar are going to take place and they're going to impact electoral rolls or electoral process, that can be disastrous and could ultimately even prejudicially impact the constitution and the basic structure of the constitution for which this living document stands. That's one. The bigger issue is, well, today now, it's a different ball game altogether. We all have a fundamental right to privacy. My right to privacy as a voter of the Indian democracy also would include my right not to have my data shared with Aadhaar. And therefore, it's not just a mere change of certain provisions in the Aadhaar Act or the Representation of People's Act. It's going to be far, far more beyond. Now, with the Personal Data Protection Bill that's supposed to come in, it's going to further complicate the entire scenario. And you'll have to ultimately look at, as a government, that look, you will not be in a position to go ahead and breach people's fundamental right to privacy under Article 21 of the Constitution unless you come up with specific caveats and provisions established under the law of the Parliament. So I see a lot of practical challenges, and I think we should learn from history. We should not really hurry up and come up in this direction and open up a more Pandora's box of problems for the Indian voters who are not yet ready for this kind of linkages.
Okay, Mr. Vinit Goenka disagrees. Mr. Goenka, it won't be a cybersecurity nightmare? Well, just respond to what Mr. Duggal
No,
is saying.
see, let me tell. See, I've been... See, Mr. Pavan Duggal is such a seasoned person, and yet if he speaks all this, then it's a little worrisome. The database of voter identity card, it is not somewhere in handwritten. It's a database been kept somewhere. It is protected, right? So like Aadhaar, so once it is linked, how would there be a challenge? Now this is a fictitious fear which is there in the mind. Okay, there would be people who would be attempting to do things to us. There may be organizations, there may be states which will like to do it, individuals or of elements. Of course, there have to be security parameters to be put around, and that will be put around there. I think it will further stand and benefit the people. Think about lakhs of people who cannot vote because they are not there in that particular constituency. A. B. Think about people who do proxy voting. I think this all will help. So my submission would be it is good. And anyway out, the database which is there for voter ID card or the database which is there for Aadhaar, as I said earlier also, and many times I've talked about on your channel and on your debate, it is safe. There would be people who would like to attempt. We
Okay.
would always make sure.
So let me ask
succeed.
Mr. Mendiratta this question. Mr. Mendiratta, the Election Commission is also of a similar view, and the BJP also says this will help us get rid of bogus voters. Now, how does that happen? Simply by linking it to the Aadhaar. Aadhaar by itself has so many issues, duplication issues, and other issues. So how does that work in terms of getting rid of bogus voters?
No, actually, there is definitely this is definitely a very good move, and we have been trying it for the last so many years. But then there were some technical, not technical, rather legal problems, because we had even started linking this Aadhaar number with the our voter electoral roll, and in fact many crores were seeded, names were seeded, but then there was some problem because that matter was before the Supreme Court, and then we had to stop it because Supreme Court had said that it should be only optional, and then we also started this, we stopped it. And now this fear that this will be a breach of privacy, and that I don't agree. About the technical aspects, I have no problem. I have no knowledge because I am not a technical man. But I feel that if you just use the number, Aadhaar number, with the electoral roll, it will definitely improve the health of the electoral rolls. It will purify them, because we have seen many people get their names registered at different places. They get their names registered in their native places. They have moved from there, then they go to some other place, and there also they get the registration. In Delhi also they get the registration. So at the time of elections, these bogus entries, because they are not there in the constituencies, so their votes are cast by some impersonation by some people.
Right.
And then that gives a very bad idea about the polling process. And I tell you, once you put the number of the Aadhaar card or Aadhaar number along with the electoral roll number, then because there is only one, as far as we understand, there is only one unique Aadhaar number.
Yes.
For any person in India. And now the electoral rolls, all electoral rolls of India have been put on the Commission's website. So just by a click, they can find out how many Aadhaar numbers are appearing against different persons. And then those other names can be deleted, and this will definitely
Okay.
help
All right.
the election commission, help
So-
the election machinery, help political parties also.
So you're saying that because it's a unique identification number, the
weeding
minute you
out
link
the
it to a voter
bogus
ID,
names.
you can then ensure that any bogus voters on the same ID are weeded out of the system. General Verma, good evening to you. Where do you stand on this question? Is the EC's idea
Good evening.
of online voting a good idea, a boon, or a bane?
Good evening, Tanvi. See, there is no denying the fact that the revision of the electoral rolls, and as a process, the ECI is doing it once a year, is a mandatory thing. I mean, they have to do it because there are people turning 18, coming of voting age, there are people who are dying, their names have to be removed. And also is the problem of the migrant voters, which is a huge number. I think almost 450 million migrants are there in our country for various reasons of work or studies or whatever. So there is no denying the fact that the electoral rolls have to be periodically reviewed and this thing. But whether Aadhaar is the best way to do it, there are large number of very grave concerns which people have expressed. The cyber expert has already given some. But the larger issues are, one is Aadhaar itself, as you mentioned, there are so many million in 2014-15, we found a huge number of fraud Aadhaar cards itself. So how do you manage that if there is a, then is the issue of bogus voters. I dare say from personal experience, talking to some politicians, they themselves are involved in having a lot of bogus voters, and they just move from one area to the other and come and vote. Then is the issue of voter profiling. This gives an option to the political parties to do voter profiling, and various manipulations can be done in that. Aadhaar linking was done, and even I think last year in some of the southern states, the local election officers had started this process, and they had told people that if you don't get your Aadhaar linked with the voter ID card, it will get cancelled. Now, firstly, this case is sub judice, that too in the Supreme Court. A constitution bench had stayed the linking. So now if the government is trying to, go through the legislative route, I don't know whether it will work, because people will again question it. But the serious thing is about the manipulation of the what the cyber expert said, because then you are leaving it open, because when all this data is there in the domain, people can use it for whatever, yeah. So we need to really give it a great thought as to how this thing can be improved. I don't think this is the best possible method that we should adopt.
Okay, Vinit Goenka wants to respond to that.
Tanvi,
if the gentleman can educate me, what is the data point which is not there currently in the voter list, which is captured in Aadhaar, how there will be profiling? Please tell me. Sir, in a voter list, they have my name, they have my address, they have my surname, they have my age, they have my gender. In Aadhaar also it's the same, sir. What additional information does Aadhaar have which can be used as a profiling? Please educate me, sir.
General
see, we feel
Sorry,
that there is
Mr.
only
Mehndi,
one
just
Aadhaar
1 minute.
number
Let General Verma respond to
and if
that.
that number is
Yeah.
okay. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So see, basically, the issue is that the Aadhaar is also being delegated to various private agencies, and the biggest concern is the security of that data. So that is all available in the cyber domain.
No, you said profiling can be done, sir. My question is very specific to you, sir. Due respect to you, how will somebody profile, sir? The information in the voter list is as same as the information in the Aadhaar. What is the additional information which you are giving? And a voter list is a public document, sir. If you have ever voted in your life, you would have seen the document is available with the political party, and they sit outside the booths of the polling booth, which is officially been given by the election commission to the political candidate who is contesting there. He has the list, sir. Then he makes his people to come and drop that cards in your house. Then he has people who sit outside the polling booth with the list. Then there is a polling agent who sits inside. The information provided on that list is your name, your date of birth, your age, your gender, your address.
Okay.
The same is the information which is there in Aadhaar. कहाँ additional है सर? क्यों misguide कर रहे हो?
What about everything else that Aadhaar gets
कैसे
linked
profiling
to?
होगा सर? एक भी information additional नहीं है.
What about everything else that people have already linked their Aadhaar to?
What is there in Aadhaar? Do you Aadhaar give you caste? No, sir. Does the Aadhaar give?
Phone numbers,
what
bank
is the information
accounts,
which Aadhaar has? Additional
personal investments.
But Aadhaar does not have a bank account, ma'am.
Buying of property, everywhere else, the people are using their Aadhaar.
Madam, I have the address in voter card.
It is.
Ma'am, your voter card has address, and this address is on the list provided to the candidate. Not only to the candidates who are from parties, but also to an independent candidate who may be good, bad, or not so good person.
No, okay.
Now, what is an additional information? So, please, do not misguide people. There is no additional data point which is not available in the public domain. So, one, clarify that. Two, whether it has a capability to be, analyzed.
Mr.
The voter card list is analyzed, sir, today. The same way, if there is but there is no Aadhaar list provided to anybody. Please show me officially, is there a document called as Aadhaar list? But yes, officially there is a list called as EP, electoral part, which is a part of the booklet provided to every candidate in every constituency.
Okay,
So
let
for
him
God's
respond.
sake,
He wants
sir,
to
if you want
respond to
really
what you're saying.
stop that list.
He wants to respond to what you're saying. Yes, General Verma.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please educate me.
Okay, so yeah. See, there is no denying. You get personal that if I have ever voted in my life and all that, I know what a voter card is. But what I'm trying to tell you is that this profiling is very real. It is being done by political parties, and linking it to Aadhaar will make it even easier for foreign people to do it. That is what I'm trying to tell you. So it has a lot of dangers. I mean, we may try to overlook it, and we can request Mr. Duggal to give his comments on this. We can request the cyber expert to give his comments on this.
Okay, all right.
But this is a concern which people are expressing.
Okay, is that a concern that needs to be looked at? Mr. Shailesh Gandhi, I'll ask you to wait for just 2 more minutes. But Pavan Duggal, do you want to weigh in on this?
Well, there's an old Indian saying that just because the pigeon is closing its eyes does not mean that the cat is going away. The same is the exact position vis-a-vis this particular proposition. We just want to close our eyes to say, well, we are the most secure. The entire world is a utopian world, and the biggest democracy of the world, that's India, opens up its doors for potential cybersecurity breaches. I have one fundamental question to ask. What is the cybersecurity landscape planning for this kind of linkages? India does not have a dedicated cybersecurity law as of now. We do not have adequate protections on breaches of cybersecurity under the Information Technology Act. The rules and regulations under the IT Act are completely silent and give no effective remedy to affected persons who get affected by these breaches. And mind you, this is going to be no normal breach. If this breach takes place once the linkages happen, your digital identity is gone once and for all. And once that happens, your intrinsic ability to vote as an Indian voter, Indian democracy, will stand prejudiced for all times to come. So if the government can actually guarantee the people, yes, I'm going to guarantee that this is never going to get breached up, then that could be a good exercise. But if you're merely going to say that, look, we are 100% secure and be rest assured, already if Aadhaar was so 100% secure, why is it that the UIDI keep on filing FIRs and criminal cases against people who breach Aadhaar? So please understand one fundamental scenario. No computer system in the world is absolutely secure. Every computer system, every network is capable of being hacked. So when you are now going to link your Aadhaar with the electoral rolls, I think India needs to learn from the lessons that America has learned the hard way. If Russian hackers can go ahead and try to influence American elections, if in Southern America you can find that elections are being potentially impacted by these kinds of cyber criminals, what kind of guarantees is the legislation going to give? The legislation currently does not even have this basic vision in mind. So you're not going to introduce an alien concept into a legislation. Already now Aadhaar is still voluntary. Now still, if you're going to make Aadhaar voluntary and you're going to join election cards or electoral rolls with Aadhaar, is it not going to become a by and large practically synonymous mandatory nature? And if that happens, would that not be in violation of either the Supreme Court judgment or even the amended Aadhaar Act?
Okay.
So I think there are a lot of these ramifications. It's a good, attractive idea on paper. But you really have to do a lot of due diligence as a nation, because you do not want your democracy, your democratic values to be at stake tomorrow.
Okay, I think it suffices to say that before we start using technology on a larger level and before we start involving personal data and people data and combining it all together, perhaps we need to have a strong framework, a strong technology infrastructure that we can safeguard this information. We need to start treating data as the most precious resource that we have and must ensure that we protect it not just from third-party vendors or any other interested parties, but from political parties and governments themselves. Mr. Shailesh Gandhi, that being said, the security part, being debated, the other aspect is that, yes, there is a concern about lost voters. There is a concern about migrants and bogus voters. Will online polling Can that be a good solution to look at, or does it still boil down to the same part? Well, it's technology, it can be hacked into. How do you make it foolproof?
Before I deal with this, I'd like to deal with the earlier proposition about cybersecurity. I've often wondered, our credit cards are worldwide system. Our banking accounts are digital and are worldwide systems. If it was so easy to hack everything, wouldn't my entire financial system crash? My credit card is linked to so many things, and all information is available, my bank account, everything is available. If that could be hacked, and if all that cannot be hacked, I'm sure there is nothing 100%. I completely agree with Mr. Duggal when he says there is nothing 100%. Either in technology or in real life, there are no 100% solutions. But the risks are fairly small. And I think India can certainly take care of those risks. And therefore, I would submit that linking the Aadhaar card to the voter card is a very good idea. And this is technology that can make a change. Now, perhaps some of you are aware, Aadhaar card has now started facial recognition also. So therefore, I think the level is going up. If there are any loopholes, if there are any black holes lying around there, they should clean it up. But I think there is a very good argument for saying that we should link Aadhaar with our voter cards. Coming to the other part of your question, would it be a good idea? Certainly it would. Technology helps us to progress. And if absentee voters could exercise their votes, as Mr. Verma said, there are probably about 4.5 lakh migrant people. That's nearly 4 to 5% of India's voters. And that's the margin by which people lose or win. Wouldn't it make sense to enable them to vote? And yes, I would certainly agree this should be gone through with a very close look. Experts should be called, IT experts. But I am convinced that there is nothing which is so loose that if my credit card can work, my banking system can work, my international financial system can work, why should only the problem come when I talk of India and Aadhaar cards? I am unable to understand that.
Okay, would anybody want to respond to that query? General Verma or Pavan Duggal, if you want to say why is it a concern simply when it comes to Aadhaar? We hear of cases of our credit card information being leaked almost every now and then.
Well, can I just...
Yes, Mr. Duggal.
I believe you have to quickly make a distinction between credit cards and Aadhaar. Aadhaar is far more serious, far more long-term ramificational in its approach and perspective than credit cards. Ask people whose digital identity tends to get compromised to see how they feel. And now, you've already said that now facial recognition is sought to be introduced. This at a time when there is no legal mandate given by the parliament of the country to actually go ahead and use facial recognition. At a time when a state like California, which is one of the most advanced technological states in the world, has come up with a law banning facial recognition. Here it's India going completely on the other side of the spectrum. I think we are not here to argue the merits or demerits. I have one fundamental issue. I do not want the sovereignty, security, and integrity of India and the Indian democracy to be compromised in any manner whatsoever. So if you want to link up, you have to do your homework properly. How do you plan to link up when you do not have a dedicated cybersecurity law? How do you plan to link up these linkages when your national cybersecurity policy of 2013 has just been a paper tiger, and as a nation, you have not been able to implement it? How do you want to link these linkages when Indian networks are constantly under attack every hour? Now, rather than closing our eyes, rather than understanding that the Aadhaar is India's critical information infrastructure, and when you link that with the electoral rolls, which is also another critical information infrastructure, all it's going to take is few hackers, some few hours, some planning, and you will have the Indian democracy on its knees. Is that what the Constitution is wanting us to stand for? Definitely not. But if you think, as a government, as a nation, this is the best interest, that 4.5 lakh voters need to be given far more primacy and supremacy as compared to the sovereign rights of the sovereign government, as also to the sovereign rights of the Indian democracy. Well, that's a call that the Indian government has to make. But clearly, I believe that there are far more cobwebs on the wall which need to be cleared let's do our homework.
Okay, Mr. Shailesh Gandhi wants to respond.
I'm sure we are all aware that even our defense systems of India and most countries around the world are basically controlled by electronic and digital means. If this whole issue of hacking was so simple, none of the defense systems would be secure. India's defense system would be unsecure. What are we saying? Are we saying go back to the old ages? I think computers are here. There are problems, there are risks, there is no perfect lock, conceded. Even in paper systems and other systems that you talk of, nothing is perfect. But this is definitely a far better way of ensuring that corruption and other ills that plague Indian society would go down. And when we compare ourselves to the United States, let's understand, we have a completely different scenario. In the United States, the concerns are more of privacy and laws work. In India, we have far greater corruption, far greater incompetence, and therefore we need to plug these holes, and this is a sure way of doing that. And defense systems, again, I would like you to consider, wouldn't the defense of India collapse? Wouldn't the defense of all the countries in the world collapse if all this could be hacked?
No, it's not just about whether it could be hacked and couldn't be hacked. We're saying that you need to have systems that are strong enough. And I just want to give a few examples here, that have been now reported in the media. For example, the Delhi police recently filed an FIR against a private company, bases a complaint by the Defense Ministry for allegedly not returning the database containing personal information of 45 lakh ex-servicemen after it completed the contract for ECHS smart cards. On a daily basis, I get reports of lakhs of crores of bank frauds and credit card frauds which are happening in our country and elsewhere, and this data being leaked and available on the dark web for anybody who wants to buy it for barely any money. That's how cheaply it is being sold. Now, is that something that we want to encourage by enabling more technology without having a stronger network, Mr. Goenka? It boils down to a stronger framework. We as a country don't even have a basic data protection law right now.
I'll answer your question, but let me also address Mr. Duggal's question. His parents have given a fantastic name starting with P, so I'll use all the P's. Let me first talk about the first P which has been discussed is present, second P would be process, third one will be protection, and the fourth one is progress. So let me talk about the first present. As I said, voter card list database is officially given to people who would like. So in case somebody has to manipulate it, it is officially handed over from election to election. So we should talk about that and stop that one. So I think once it is linked to Aadhaar, it will help us to reduce that, and maybe probably the ill effects will be done away. So the present is really good. It will help people who cannot vote because they are outside the constituency. It will help migrants. It will help refugees within the country. So it's the one thing. Number two, about the process part, the P for process. Well, if there are laws to be made, processes have to change. The legislation has a right, Parliament has a right to do that. They would come out if somebody wants to challenge it. Courts are open. They always discuss the laws been passed, the processes been defined under the law. Third one is about protection. Let me tell you with certain degree of confidence, it is really protected. There are people who would like to create, mess, and rightly said by Mr. Gandhi, when credit cards are protected, are there somebody who's worried that Aadhaar will be successful and their validation money which they get on their credit card charges are worried? So I think that has been already been set aside by Supreme Court and all the discussions. There were challenges. There was a challenge by the bureaucrat also, which was not proved. So protection is very there. Yes, there would be people who would be interested to derail you. There would be people who would like to embrace you. They have been told they are criminals. The criminals will be held to death. The last P stands for progress. A country progresses when it takes the technology head on. No country progresses if you show your back to the technology. For God's sake, we have suffered. We were not there in the first industrial revolution. We were not there in the second revolution. This is the fourth industrial revolution which is coming up. Please embrace that. Please take that on. Go ahead, take Aadhaar. I would request authorities if they could listen to me, parliamentarians if they can listen to me. Not only linking, do away with this multiple, cards in your pocket. Do away with your birth certificate. Do away with your voter card, rationing shop. Let us have only one single card. That was it is unique card where you have a single card which can be used. Yes, if there are discussions on technology, we will address that. But do not mix technological discussion with law and law discussion with precedent and precedent discussions with criminals. They are all separate things. We'll deal it. There were laws on criminal activities, yet you have murders and rapes. Society is like that. You have to deal with them, sir.
Okay, but the question that I asked you, we don't even have a data protection law in place right now. What's the rush?
It will come up, ma'am. The new cybersecurity strategy, and Mr. Duggal individually knows what is going on. I don't have to spill these beans here. He is well aware. He is a part of the suggestion team. He has always contributed. He's a gentleman. And there are people who are talking about this. If somebody picks up Indian Economic Times of yesterday, they would see a part whereby the cybersecurity command coordinator, Lieutenant General Pant, commits that, the strategy paper has been submitted. Now, well, these kind of papers don't come out overnight.
So you are saying we will wait to implement all of this only after we have a strong framework, a strong data protection law that safeguards our privacy, our data,
It's there.
and takes
The strong
anybody
paper,
to
it is
task.
there.
No, it's not
It is
happened
there.
yet, Mr.
There are interested
Vinit
parties
Goenka.
who would
We are
create that
implementing Aadhaar
confusion in your mind.
everywhere and constantly having this debate again and again and again
It is there.
about data leakages, about data privacy, and the law is in there. And the
just
law
see, they're
itself is
benefiting.
problematic.
Just also talk about the
The
benefit.
law itself is
90,000 crore has been
problematic.
saved in
You know
DBT,
that.
direct benefit transfer. So the planners get an exact data. Informed decision making is always a good decision making process where you have exact number of people. So I would suggest, those people who are trying to create confusion about Aadhaar, those people who are against this thing, let them come out and tell one solid reason why they are opposing it. As I gave you a reasoning, voter card list is available officially. Where is the Aadhaar card which is available officially? Yes, if there is a breach, it will be dealt by law. In the society, there are breaches, there are criminals, there are people who would like to upset the society. So the laws will take care of them.
Okay, and the other question that I had was, if we do move towards an era of online voting or remote voting, how do we ensure that there is no question of any kind of hacking, people breaking in and then resorting to bogus voting?
Well, I'm not equipped right now to answer you this question. But yes, I also dream that we can have an online voting. When technology has come, I never had thought as a child that I would write emails or, chats with my friends, colleagues and people across the globe within seconds. I was habituated to write letters which would reach them in weeks or sometimes in months. Technology progressed. Yes, I benefited. Yes, there are people who would have done infringement. They would have barged in my email. They would have tried to hijack my email. Yes, so this is a part of progress.
Is there something
So
available
address that by head on. You have to go head on and take this kind of challenges. You don't show them back, man.
Is
I'm
there
sure,
another solution available,
when
General
things are
Verma, to ensure that migrant voters are able to also participate and vote? There is some other option available to get back the
don't
lost
mix
votes?
two issues. My request to you, Ms. Tanvi, would be, as I said, there are 4 P's: present, process, protection and progress. The present is already set. So the discussion is set. The process will be when the law comes in, the policy comes in. Okay, if the policy comes in, that it is linked, it's a part of process. Protection, it's a job of the technocrats, technology providers. Okay, and the last part is progress. That is where the executives
Mr. Goenka,
come.
we're simply
That
having
they
a
show the
discussion. You
country a
don't have to
path of
get so
progress.
defensive about
So
it.
I would like to congratulate the department which
very
proposes
interesting
this.
idea is being proposed. Laws are being changed from the People's Representation Act to the Aadhaar Act. We're trying to understand what's going on. That's fine. That's simply a question that I'm asking. General Verma.
So, yeah, Tanvi, in the session that you had of lost votes, and Mr. Mendiratha was also part of it, and I was also there listening to the proceedings, a lot of good ideas had come up as to how the migrant voters can also be brought into the mainstream and be given a chance to do the voting. Now, in certain countries, like in USA also, this thing is done that in a particular city, certain booths are earmarked for migrant people. So they have to give their proof of their identity and they can vote from those places. Yes, there are a lot of issues involved in that, but yes, those can be managed. But coming back to the issue of linking of Aadhaar and this, my feeling is that, okay, if it has to be tried, we should do it as a pilot project, maybe start in some area for, let's say, the municipal corporation elections or something before fiddling with the assembly and the general elections. That is my suggestion.
All right. I take your point, and unfortunately, I'm completely out of time. But thank you to all of our panelists for joining us in such a constructive discussion. The idea was simply to understand if this can be a boon or a bane, what can be the challenges technology-wise and otherwise, if you look at a possibility of linking your voter ID with Aadhaar and then taking it to next step and saying, well, let's enable remote online voting so that even if you're traveling or elsewhere for work, haven't had the time to shift your registration from one place to the other, you can still vote and participate in elections. From what it seems, we are far, far away from having a relatively safer technological framework that will ensure that those who are looking for our data, those who are looking for our personal information and are looking to then use this perhaps against us are kept at bay. The government should ensure that only once we have a strong privacy law, data protection law and a strong tech framework should we move ahead with something which is as sensitive and as serious as our vote and our voting choice and our privacy and our data. Thank you so much for joining us. Days ahead of his visit to India, US President Donald Trump has sent across a big message. No trade deal with India in this visit. He even indirectly gave a reason why India doesn't treat us well. President Trump, though, praised Prime Minister Modi. Now, before we bring in our experts to really understand if there isn't a trade deal, what else can be on the cards? What should we expect from President Trump's visit? Will it simply be few visuals and rhetorics, or can something constructive and beneficial really come out of it, for India at least? That's the big question. First up, listening to what President Trump said.
Well, we can have a trade deal with India, but I'm really saving the big deal for later on. We're doing a very big trade deal with India. We'll have it. I don't know if it'll be done before the election, but we'll have a very big deal with India. We're not treated very well by India, but I happen to like Prime Minister Modi a lot. And he told me we'll have 7 million people between the airport and the event. And the stadium, I understand, is sort of semi under construction, but it's going to be the largest stadium in the world. So it's going to be very exciting. But he says between the stadium and the airport, we'll have about 7 million people. So it's going to be very exciting.
Well, so that's what President Trump has to say. He'll be landing here on Monday morning, and then for the next 2 days, he'll be spending time in Ahmedabad, in Gujarat, and then the national capital. Let's say good evening to Smita Sharma, senior journalist, an expert on foreign policy, and Chidanand Rajkata, foreign editor for Times of India. And Mr. Chidanand, good evening to you. Rather good morning. If I can first begin with you and ask you, what should we make of this comment where President Trump says, we are not treated very well by India. There will be a big trade deal, but perhaps only after elections.
Well, a couple of things. One is, he has had a long-standing gripe that not just India, but the rest of the world is somehow ripping off the United States. So that's a sort of standard gripe he has expressed many times over. Specifically about the India visit, it's clear that, there's no trade deal. They haven't been able to bridge the differences. There are a lot of issues, the trade negotiators have grappled with for the past several months, not happening. So this will be largely a photo op. But also, I don't think we should minimize the fact that the President of the United States is traveling halfway across the world with his wife, the First Lady, on a 36-hour solo visit to India. So there's also a strategic message here, particularly with regards to what's happening between the U.S. and China, the tensions therein, that the U.S. really supports India as a bulwark against Chinese expansionism. I don't think we should minimize that. It's all very well to say, yes, it's a photo op, everything is optics. But I think there is a strategic message here. So in that sense, it's an important visit. It's not very often that Mr. Trump, goes on solo bilateral visit. My recollection is of only one. He went to Japan on a solo bilateral visit. But in 3 years, he's never ventured out to one country, and that too, it's just a point to point. It's like a 36-hour visit. So it's quite significant. trade deal or not is secondary.
Okay, trade deal or not, or perhaps no trade deal this time. Further conversations for a deal at a later point. Smita, what can we expect then specifically for India?
Well, as far as, the India visit is concerned, I agree with Chidanand. I think if you look at the trade deal that we were talking about, essentially remember the past 8 months, the negotiations that were happening were on the goods sides of things, not on the services. And that mini deal also, we were expecting, there was a buzz that it's not going to happen eventually. Lighthizer, the US trade representative, is considered a formidable opponent. They have had, the Trump administration in particular, have had a protectionist view. And this entire complaint about India being a tariff king along with many other countries, or the American system being abused, it works well into the American political narrative that is playing out as far as Donald Trump is concerned domestically. He's a few months away from the presidential polls where he is up for re-election, and as of now it looks like he has a very, very strong chance to return. But for India, I do agree with Chidanand that you have to separate out this visit in two aspects. One is the Ahmedabad and the Agra part of it. Ahmedabad is going to be all about the grand spectacle. It's going to be about the optics. That's something, Prime Minister Modi pays a lot of attention to, and Donald Trump clearly likes. But I think the messaging that an American president, for the first time in the history of India-US ties, which, remember, has also seen the dark phase of the late 70s, the 90s. For the longest, you didn't even have an American president visiting India. Today, you have reached a level of maturity in relationship where the president in his last term, in the last year of his first term in office, is actually undertaking a 36-hour travel, and he hates foreign travel. He really doesn't like to do long-distance travel. In the 90s, India would fight with that entire concept of a hyphenated trip of the American president to India and Pakistan on every such trip that played out. So I think for India, what they're really looking at is to try and send out the message that this is a long-term strategic partnership you're looking for. There will be some helicopter deal announcement where essentially, of course, India is under pressure to buy a lot more from US to reduce the trade surplus to its advantage. But essentially talking about the larger strategic component, be it in Indo-Pacific, be it vis-a-vis China, or remember Afghanistan, where Americans are close to a peace deal and negotiating with the Taliban, and the situation remains in a flux at the moment.
Okay, but let me ask this question, to both of you, and maybe we can begin with you, Smita. Yes, he may be coming just to our country, and he barely ever steps out. But does it really mean great things for India, or is it simply for President Trump himself? Because there is a huge Indian voter base that he's staring at, and this is election year in US.
Look, in terms of the Indian size, when we talk about the diaspora, it's a 7 million strong diaspora with a 1 million strong NRI presence that's there. Can it really swing the vote? Not really. It has a strong political voice today. It has worked up through the political galleries of the American, in fact, political system. But beyond that, I think for India, look, I am one of the cynics here, Tanvi, and I do believe that while not every day, not on every visit, you can have a big ticket announcement like a civilian nuclear deal that we saw way back in 2005, or say the next steps in strategic partnership, NSSP in 2005, civilian nuclear deal of 2008. But it is normal to expect that there will be at least some important announcements. At the moment, what we are looking at is, in fact, solidifying the partnership, especially in terms of defense and energy. What works to India's advantage is to try and make sure that it continues to balance it out, its relations, because remember, Russia still remains the biggest importer for arms and weapons for India. It may have gone down from an earlier 70% to a current 62 to 63%. So when India goes in for an acquisition of S-400, the system in New Delhi trying to get those maneuvers from CATSA sanctions in Washington, D.C., those diplomatic challenges, tightrope walking, these are major concerns for India. Of course, India has been criticized for reducing its oil imports from a country like Iran to almost zero, and US has actually become one of the largest, the sixth largest, country from where we are sourcing out our hydrocarbons and our crude oil at the moment. So there's going to be more of a give from India, less of a take for now. But what New Delhi is hoping for, that this essentially plays out in the longer terms and is not viewed as a zero-sum game.
More of a gift from India, less of a
Yeah.
take, perhaps a mention of terrorism in the joint statement. Mr. Rajgata, do you agree?
Yes, by and large, but let me dial down and drill down the idea of the Indian American vote. It's true that in the larger scheme of things, the Indian American vote does not count for much. There may be a million or so across the country. But more and more, the 2020 election, everyone agrees, sort of drills down to just 2 or 3 states that Mr. Trump has to win to get a second term. And one of these states is Wisconsin. And I have to mention this because there have been several analyses which says this election will go down to the wire in Wisconsin. Why is Wisconsin important in the Indian context? 2 reasons. One, it's a big dairy state, and the Americans have been pressing India to buy, American dairy products, milk, cheese, stuff like that. And India has been resisting because, dairy is sacrosanct to us. The way Americans treat cows does not comport with how India wants it, and so on. And two, Wisconsin is also the headquarters of Harley Davidson. And remember, Trump won 2016 election in Wisconsin by just 23,000 votes. 23,000 votes. There are more than 23,000 Indian Americans in Wisconsin, I can assure you that. So it's interesting that Mr. Trump himself talked about the trade deal in the context of elections. If you play back that comment, he says, we might get it done before the election. I don't think it's going to get done by the election, and so on. So in his mind, he knows that Indian American vote may not be big across the country, but in 2 or 3 states, they are very important. And I think every 10,000 votes count. But beyond all this, the electoral politics, the minutiae of American politics, and so on, I think it's important to realize that there is an incredible continuity in India-US relations. Now, there are eight American presidents have visited India. It took 50 years for the first 4 to visit India. And now in the last 20 years or 25 years, every single American president, Democrat and Republican, I think 2 Democrats, Clinton and Obama, 2 Republicans, Bush and now Trump, have visited India. So there's a sense of continuity. There is a sense of backing India. So I think it's important not to lose sight of this. I mean, all these optics, photo opportunities, Taj Mahal, yada, yada, that's one part of it. But I think there's a greater depth to this relationship, and there's a greater sense that regardless of which, party comes to power in India or which party is in power in the United States, US-India relations is a long-term bet.
Okay, Smita, then to you, we mentioned and we spoke about the possibility of something on the defense side, perhaps a deal, but from India's end, will a larger focus continue to be the fight against terrorism and perhaps getting something out of the Americans into the joint statement on that front?
Yes, that will clearly be, in fact, something that the two sides are definitely trying to work on, and the attempt is to try and reflect a larger progress in ties over the years, something that Chidanand was pointing out to. You have those 24, in fact, MHRs, the MH-60R helicopters that the Cabinet Committee on Security has today cleared for acquisition for an approximate cost of around $6 billion. You're also looking at a growing significant volume of bilateral trade, which stands at around $142 billion currently. The country is hoping to push it to $150 billion in the next few years. But in terms of homeland security, in terms of counter-terrorism, remember this visit is also happening at a time, Tanvi, when India has had to do so much of firefighting on the international stage when it comes to the developments in Kashmir, when it comes to the CAA and the NRC protests. And there has been, in fact, much sound and noise, even in the US Congress, which at the moment has been at daggers drawn with the administration and very adversely sort of, placed to Donald Trump, the president itself. So in between all of this, New Delhi is hoping that while Donald Trump may have been making these statements on Kashmir, talking of these controversial remarks about possible offers of mediation, something that Delhi has declined time and again and said that this is only conditional and it's not acceptable to us. But in terms of Pakistan, in terms of the terrorism emanating from Pakistan, be it in terms of ensuring that Pakistan remains on that grey list on the Financial Action Task Force, these are countries like France, America, that then become very, very important in the United Nations Security Council, be it a listing for Masood Azhar or the post-Pulwama situation where you saw strong American support for the Indian action. Post-Uri also, we saw, in fact, the Indian-American, the then NSAs being in touch. So
Correct.
I think these are sectors where definitely, especially post the Mumbai attacks in 2008, the cooperation has deepened, and India is hoping that these can be the key pillars when it comes to the strategic component of this relationship.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And the fact that when India took that very bold step of carrying out strikes in Pakistan, there wasn't the kind of pressure and hue and cry that you would have otherwise perhaps a few years ago seen from the West. And in fact, this time there was a lot more backing of the kind of action that we had taken. So that does show a change in the kind of ties we've had and the efforts that have been taken by this government. I must say it's been a pleasure to have both of you on this conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your views. We're of course going to keep bringing you more and more updates from Ahmedabad to Agra, then to New Delhi. What is it that the people are saying? What can be expected? The benefits both for the Trump administration, but more importantly for India and the Modi government. That's going to be our top focus here on Mirror Now. Short break, lots more on the other side. We put the spotlight on special ground reports coming in from Ahmedabad. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, before we slipped into the break, we told you the comments that President Trump made about a possible or not really a possible trade deal with India. Now, as India prepares for his visit, the opposition parties aren't really impressed with this. Congress leader Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary downplayed the visit and questioned Trump's claims of 7 million people greeting him in Ahmedabad. NCP alleged that India was being used ahead of the US presidential polls, and the left parties actually called for a protest against President Trump.
इसलिए एक्साइटेड होना चाहिए ट्रम्प के लिए? ट्रम्प क्या भगवान राम है क्या? हमारे लिए एक अमेरिका की प्रेसिडेंट है, तो इनके लिए 7 मिलियन लोगों की खड़ा करने की क्या जरूरत है? उनको तो पूजा करने के लिए हम लोग यहाँ हिंदुस्तान के लोग नहीं खड़ा बैठेंगे। ट्रम्प आएगा, ट्रेड डील वो नहीं करना चाहते इसलिए कि वो प्रोटेक्शनिज्म बरकरार रखना चाहते हैं।
The Donald Trump visit to the India in Ahmedabad, he's talking like he's excited that 7 million people will be there. I think it is nothing but the propaganda of American presidential election to get benefit in that election. He had announced that after election there will be a big deal with India. It is nothing. It is all election gimmick. But American people are aware what kind of things are happening in India. It is to get benefit in election. This event is for that only, nothing else.
They have certain common characters and common issues to be excited and to be closer. Let us see what exactly is going to happen in Ahmedabad. But as far as left parties are concerned, CPI is concerned, we have given a call for protest against the visit of Mr. Donald Trump, the US President.
Well, in fact, now let's get you some reports. A Donald Trump fan from Telangana has urged the center to help him meet the US President. Telangana resident named Krishna Bussa, who is a resident of the Konnoi village, built a lifelike statue in which his village is now called the Trump Village.
मुसा कृष्णा पहला नाम मुसा कृष्णा, वो ट्रम्प को पूजा कर रहे हैं ना, वो पूजा करने बाद में वो ट्रम्प कृष्णा नाम वो चेंज हो गया।
Okay, let's shift the spotlight to Gujarat now, where Times Network's Kajal Iyer has been bringing us regular updates on the way the city of Ahmedabad is preparing for US President Trump's visit. Now, Here is a special report she sent for us and for our viewers to understand the route the presidential cavalcade in Ahmedabad will take. Take a look.
President Trump's cavalcade will be passing from the opposite side of this road, but he will be greeted by these visuals of these beautiful paintings that have been made on the walls by the AMC. You can see they are showing the culture of the state. They're showing various social messages to save water, Garba being depicted, a typical Gujarati woman being depicted, even Kalpana Chawla being depicted here. All of these things to tell President Trump about the culture of Gujarat, Mahatma Gandhi there, the kind of education system that the state has. All of this has been depicted here to give President Trump an idea as to the kind of development that Ahmedabad has actually seen. This is the road that he will take once he leaves the riverfront and goes towards Sabarmati Ashram. President Trump will see this view of the riverfront park and the Sabarmati river as he passes through, and right opposite is where the ashram is, and he will be going through this route this is a beautiful route even on a normal day, and on the day that President Trump will come, of course, it will be beautified even further. This road leads up to the Sabarmati Ashram, and this is what will greet President Trump once he comes along the Sabarmati. Now we will move towards Motera Stadium. Similar to the earlier place, you can see that these barricades are being constructed on the way to Motera also, and you can see that they are being painted, they are being constructed. This is where all of these people will actually be standing, waving out to President Trump and Melania Trump, and you can see that decorations have been done even on the plants there. Lighting has been put up on those plants there, and from here they will proceed towards Motera Stadium, a few kilometers from here, that is, and there is where the Namaste Trump, the final event, will be held, where industrialists, businessmen, cricketers, all of them will be there. Around a crowd of over 1 lakh will be there, and President Trump and Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister, will be addressing the crowd and talking about the bond that they shared between each other. So right now we are on the second leg of the road show, moving back from Sabarmati Ashram to the airport and back towards Motera Stadium.